Our own pets can really surprise us sometimes. This mom got worried when her cat scratched her little boy. She set up a camera and ended up seeing something she never expected. Stick with us to hear this wild story. Kim was shaken when she picked up her baby that morning. His tiny chest was covered in scratches. Belle, their cat, was curled up on the windowsill, looking peaceful. Kim couldn't believe Belle could have done something like this. Belle had always been like her first baby, and Kim always said she was the one who brought their family closer together. But now, something felt horribly wrong. They had to find out what was going on. Belle hopped down and rubbed herself against Kim's legs like nothing had happened. It made Kim's heart ache. She couldn't even imagine what she would do if Belle had somehow become a danger to her baby. But they couldn't just pretend nothing was happening either. Kim's husband, Mike, tried to comfort her. They decided to set up cameras in the nursery and see what was happening while they weren't looking. They kept a close eye on things the whole rest of the day. Strangely, everything seemed completely normal. During snack time, the baby shared a little of his food with Belle, and she gently licked his fingers, making him giggle. At nap time, Belle curled up right next to him. If she was angry or aggressive, she sure was hiding it well. But the next morning, the baby had even more scratches across his little body. Kim and Mike rushed to check the video footage, and what they saw was terrifying. They could hardly believe their eyes. Kim first met Belle when she was just a tiny kitten. Back then, Kim would visit the animal shelter often, helping out by playing with the dogs and cats, feeding them, and walking the dogs. She had thought about adopting or fostering a cat, but hadn't made a decision yet. One afternoon, while she was working with one of the dogs, a staff member called her over to see something. It was the tiniest kitten Kim had ever laid eyes on. Someone had found her abandoned by the side of the road. They had waited and watched for hours to see if her mom would return, but she never did. When it became clear she was all alone, they brought her to the shelter. The little kitten was only a few hours old and absolutely precious. The shelter was full, and they couldn't keep a kitten so young there. Usually, Kim thought decisions through very carefully, but this time her heart took over. She had already fallen in love with the little one and didn't want to leave her. Kim quickly offered to foster her and take her home. The kitten would need constant care, including waking up every few hours for feeding. But since Kim worked from home, she was ready for the challenge. The shelter knew her well, and since she had already passed all the home checks, they let her take the kitten home right away. They were so thankful someone could care for the tiny sweetheart. Before bringing her home, Kim took the little kitten, who she decided to name Belle, to the vet to make sure she was healthy. She also needed to pick up all the supplies and learn exactly how to care for her brand new baby. Kim's life had already changed the day she met Belle, but even bigger changes were coming. When she brought Belle to the vet, she met someone she thought was almost as adorable as the kitten she was cradling. Mike was a young vet who volunteered at the shelter, always ready to help out the animals and the people who loved them. He was happy to help Kim and her tiny rescue. Deep down, though, Mike worried that this little kitten might break Kim's heart one day. Abandoned kittens sometimes had hidden health problems, and he gently tried to warn Kim about it. But Kim didn't want to hear it. She was all in and determined to give Belle the best shot at life. The next few weeks were tough. Kim took Belle everywhere she went, keeping her tucked safely inside her jacket to stay warm. At home, Belle was usually found snoozing right against her heart. Kim fed her every few hours, and the two quickly built a deep bond. It really felt like having a newborn all over again. Before long, Kim told the shelter that Belle wasn't a foster anymore. She was staying for good, or at least that's what Kim hoped. Life has a way of changing plans in an instant. Mike made it a point to check in often to see how Belle and Kim were doing. Sometimes their conversations drifted into talking about other things, and they always ended up laughing. But their next meeting wouldn't be so cheerful. Belle had been eating solid foods for a little while now and running around the house like a ball of energy. It seemed like they were finally past the hardest part. But then one night, things suddenly shifted. As Kim and Mike watched TV, Kim noticed that Belle wasn't acting like herself. She wasn't chasing her toys like she usually did, and she didn't touch her dinner either. It worried Kim, but she told herself maybe Belle was just worn out from a busy day. Then, in the middle of the night, things got much worse. Belle woke up breathing funny, and when she tried to walk, she was shaky and couldn't stay steady on her paws. That's when Kim knew this was serious. She almost called Mike at home, but decided to wait a few more hours since the vet office would open soon anyway. By the time Mike and his team arrived at the clinic that morning, Kim was already there, holding Belle close to her chest. Mike came in smiling, but the moment he saw the limp little kitten in Kim's arms, he dropped everything and rushed over. Belle wasn't getting enough oxygen. They quickly set her up with an oxygen supply and started trying to figure out what had gone wrong. It took several tests before Mike had to deliver the news Kim had been dreading. Belle had a serious heart defect. She was a very sick kitten, but that didn't mean they were giving up, not even close. Kim knew she couldn't let her little fighter down. They had to come up with a plan. Belle's heart defect wasn't the worst it could have been, but it was likely the reason her mother had left her behind. They had to fix it quickly. The first step was surgery, and it was scary. Belle was still so tiny, but without the operation, she wouldn't have a real chance to grow up strong. Kim was allowed to visit her and hold her before the surgery the next day. After that, all she could do was wait and hope for the best. When Mike finally walked out of the operating room, his face was serious, and Kim's heart dropped. She couldn't tell if he had good news or bad. But when he spoke, Kim just broke down crying, happy tears this time. Belle had made it through the surgery perfectly. She was going to be okay. They would keep her at the clinic for a while and might need to put her on some medication, but together they would make sure Belle lived a long, happy life. During Belle's stay at the clinic, Kim visited every chance she got. But when the day came for Kim to bring Belle home, Mike didn't miss his chance. He asked her out on a date. Since Kim didn't want to leave Belle alone, they kept it simple: pizza and movies at home. That night marked the start of something special. About a year later, Kim and Mike got married, and of course Belle was right there at the wedding, carrying the rings. She even went with them on their honeymoon. Belle had helped bring their little family together, which made it even harder to understand why she seemed to turn against their baby. From the very beginning, Belle had been wonderful with the baby, even before he was born. Kim and Mike had always believed the bond would come naturally between them, just like it had for all three of them. In fact, before Kim even knew she was pregnant, Belle had started acting differently. She would climb onto Kim's lap and rub her head against her belly. She even slept with her head resting there, something she had never done before. At the time, none of it made much sense. It was only after they found out they were expecting that they realized what had been happening. Belle had sensed the new life growing inside Kim way before they had, and her sweet, protective behavior only grew stronger as the pregnancy moved along. Kim and Mike were thrilled by Belle's love and loyalty, especially because a lot of people around them had been asking if they planned to get rid of Belle once the baby arrived. The answer had always been a firm no. Some warned them that Belle might get jealous or even aggressive, but they didn't believe it for a second. Plus, Mike handled all the litter box chores, so there was no risk to Kim or the baby. People were acting like they had lost their minds. Or were they right? Kim went into labor a few weeks earlier than expected, and they weren't totally ready yet. But everything turned out just fine. Both Kim and their brand-new baby boy Ryan were healthy and doing well. Their hospital stay ended up being a few days longer than planned, and it was the longest Belle had ever been apart from Kim. They expected Belle to be glued to Kim the second she walked through the door, but something completely different happened. When they got home, Belle came straight up to them. But instead of focusing on Kim, she went right over to the car seat where little Ryan was tucked in. She rubbed against the seat and gently pressed her head to the baby's forehead. It was the sweetest thing either of them had ever seen, and both Kim and Mike got choked up. It really felt like everything was falling into place perfectly, but life, as always, had some surprises ahead. Their family was already going through big changes, and even more were on the way. They were moving into a new house, and poor Belle had to deal with a lot all at once. She wasn't the only baby anymore, and now she was in a strange new place. On top of that, her world was a whole lot louder. Before Ryan came along, it was usually just Belle and Kim at home all day, with Kim working and Belle snoozing nearby. Mike would be at the clinic, and Belle had her routine down pat. But now there was a crying baby, visitors popping in, and endless commotion. Belle, who had always been so outgoing and relaxed, started looking a little stressed with all the changes. Honestly, Kim and Mike couldn't blame her. They were running on fumes themselves. And to make it even harder, their sweet little boy came with one very tough challenge: colic. Ryan wasn't sleeping for weeks. He would cry most of the night, and his tired parents would take turns trying everything to calm him down. It was rough. Sometimes, when one of them felt like they just couldn't do it anymore, Belle would jump up and curl into their lap, offering silent comfort. It always helped, even if just a little. But something else even more surprising started happening. When Ryan was on the edge of waking up and crying, Belle would sometimes climb right into his crib and lay her head on his tiny tummy. Amazingly, it often soothed him right back to sleep. The cat helped him feel safe and calm, almost like she understood what he needed better than anyone else. Still, this was also the first time Belle ever showed any hint of aggression. If someone reached for Ryan too fast or leaned over his crib too suddenly, Belle would sometimes hiss at them. She never hurt anyone, but she made it clear that she didn't like anyone getting too close to her baby without being gentle. Kim and Mike never worried that Belle would hurt Ryan. They truly believed she loved him with her whole little heart. But after months of no sleep, a big move, and so much stress, both Kim and Mike were starting to feel like they were barely hanging on. Ryan had finally started sleeping better, but Kim and Mike were so drained it felt like they'd never catch up. Then their family surprised them with an incredible gift. They had hired a night nanny for a whole week. It meant they could actually get some sleep, knowing there was someone they trusted watching over Ryan through the night. They wouldn't have to jump up every time he made a little noise. Up until then, Ryan had been sleeping in their room, but at this point, they were willing to try anything. The nanny was also a trained nurse and came highly recommended. They met her a few times during the day, and she seemed wonderful with Ryan. What really helped them feel better, though, was Belle's reaction. Belle didn't mind at all when the nanny picked up Ryan. She stayed completely relaxed around her, which meant everything to Kim and Mike. That first night, they were all a little nervous, but after saying goodnight to Ryan and the nanny, Kim and Mike finally got to sleep, real sleep, for the first time in months. It felt amazing. Even Belle eventually curled up at the foot of their bed, clearly just as tired as they were. With a little energy finally back in their tanks, Kim took Belle and the baby out for a walk the next day. Belle didn't go outside unless she was on her leash, and now Kim had the strength to get everyone out into the fresh air. Their new neighborhood was close to a beautiful forest, and the walk was everything they needed. Feeling brave, Kim and Mike decided to take it a step further. The next night, they used the nanny's help to go on their first date night since Ryan was born. They had a simple, romantic night out, feeling happy, and finally a little like themselves again. But they never could have guessed how different things would look the next morning. When they got home that night, Ryan was fast asleep in his crib, with Belle curled up protectively beside him. The nanny had been unsure about the cat at first, but Kim and Mike reassured her it was fine. Belle had always been gentle. Everything seemed perfect as they floated off to bed on their little bubble of happiness. But the next morning, that bubble burst. When Kim went to pick up Ryan, her heart dropped. His tiny body was covered in scratches, even a few on his sweet little face. She froze, horrified. Had Belle done this? Was she jealous? Had all the changes pushed her over the edge? Had their night out somehow upset her? Kim didn't know, and she was terrified of what the answers might be. All day, Kim couldn't stop crying. The thought of Belle hurting Ryan crushed her. If Belle really had turned into a danger, it would be like having to choose between two of her babies, something she couldn't even imagine doing. Mike hurried to set up a camera in Ryan's room. They needed to know exactly what was happening. All day long, they watched every interaction between Belle and the baby. But what they saw was strange. They kept watching the footage, but nothing looked wrong. Belle licked Ryan's little fingers, making him giggle. Ryan had just started eating solids, and he loved sharing his snacks with Belle. They even napped together like always. Everything seemed normal, but they did notice Belle was acting a little more on edge. Every tiny noise made her jump. It was odd, but they didn't know what to think yet, until the next morning. Ryan woke up with even more scratch marks. Poor Kim was sick with worry, heartbroken at the thought that Belle might be hurting their child. But when they checked the camera again, they saw something that made their blood run cold. After Kim and Mike had gone to bed, the night nurse went in to check on Ryan. Belle was curled up at the end of the crib, lifting her head sleepily as the nurse entered. Everything seemed fine at first. Then the nurse, probably feeling how warm the room was, cracked open the top window. That's when everything changed. The second the window opened, Belle's whole body language shifted. She was on full alert, staring hard at the window like she was expecting something. A few minutes later, after the nurse had quietly left, the room was dark and still, until two glowing eyes appeared at the open window. It all happened fast. Belle leapt onto Ryan, scratching him as she moved, trying to shield him. Every time the creature outside shifted, Belle shifted too, blocking Ryan's body with her own. She even accidentally scratched his face while trying to jump around and protect him. On the video, the shadowy figure became clear. It was a bat. A bat probably wouldn't have harmed Ryan, but Belle didn't know that. She was ready to fight for him without a second thought. Growing up mostly indoors, she had never seen anything like it. But that didn't matter. She was willing to do anything to keep her boy safe. Kim and Mike were stunned and incredibly proud. Belle had loved Ryan just as much as they had always believed. She wasn't a danger. She was his fierce little guardian. The bat flew off without hurting anyone, and from then on, they made sure to install screens on all the windows. Belle never had to protect Ryan like that again, and she never scratched him by accident again either. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this incredible story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing true animal tales. See you next time.